Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you for a very special video. La La Land Records recently released an ultimate cut of Friday the 13th Part 2 soundtrack on CD. So I'm coming at you to review Friday the 13th Part 2, the ultimate cut soundtrack CD. As you might be able to tell, I was lucky enough to get one of the autographed versions signed by composer Harry Manfredini himself. If you ordered from La La Land Records not long after this was put on sale, you were lucky enough to get a signed copy at no additional cost. I pretty much ordered within the first half hour that the CD went on sale, and I was very, very lucky, probably the tail end of getting the autograph, because after I placed my order I looked at the page again and the autographed CDs thing was gone and it said no more are available. So I was all panicked, like, oh my god, did I miss out on the autograph? But I got it in the mail and luckily I did not miss out on the autograph. So a little bit of brief history. La La Land Records released an ultimate cut of the soundtrack of the first Friday the 13th film in December of 2021. I found out about it in January, I think, and obviously got right on that CD at that time and did a review of that last year. Cut to basically a year later, January of 2023, it was announced that La La Land Records would be releasing an ultimate cut of the soundtrack for Friday the 13th Part 2. And honestly, part of me was like, well, the first film was one of my favorite movies of all time, and I had to have that, you know, soundtrack with the newly discovered tapes remixed and remastered and stuff. And honestly, when the news of this one, you know, the soundtrack of being recently discovered and remixed and remastered just like the first film, I was like, God, do I even, you know, I love the first, 4 or 5 Friday the 13th films. I mean, I love the first 7, and the early ones are among the most important in films and meaningful Friday the 13th films to me. And I was like, God, part of me was like, do I even want to get this? Because I've got the La La Land Records CD limited edition set of the first 6 films that they put out in 2012 or 13 or whatever the hell it was. So I got that. So I was like, God, do I even need this? But upon, thinking about it more, I'm like, this is Friday the 13th Part 2. It's your favorite movie franchise. It's one of your favorite Friday the 13th films. If you order, right away after that goes on sale, you might get an autographed copy. It was a no-brainer, so I definitely went for it and got it, as you can tell. And having just recently listened to it once and then just recently listened to it again just today, I'm here to obviously give my thoughts on the CD release. Before I get into my review, I did want to mention some thoughts I had. So, obviously when they did the first soundtrack for the first film and remixed and remastered and, basically restored it from the original master tape recordings of the score for the first film, now that 2 has been released, it makes you wonder, so when they discovered the soundtrack for the first, did they discover it for the second at the same time? And, it also makes you wonder, did they, discover other ones for like the new music from, Friday the 13th Part 3 and Final Chapter? As you all may or may not know, a lot of the music in Part 3 and 4 were recycled cues from the first films, so only like the beginning and the end features new music in Friday 3 and Final Chapter, which is the 4th film. So I mean, would they even, if they did find the original recordings for 3 and 4, would they even do this like next year, say? Maybe something that would be more appropriate would be to do like a one release of 3 and 4, because there's not that much new music recorded for 3 and 4, so maybe that would be a nice treat for the fans to simply release a ultimate cut of 3 and 4 on one release. 5, as we all know, is all newly recorded music, so they could definitely put one CD out of Friday the 13th Part 5 ultimate cut CD release if they wanted. Getting on to the review of this particular title, the ultimate cut of Friday the 13th Part 2 music by Harry Manfredini. Just like with the ultimate cut of the first film, it's it's definitely sounds really great, and it's really cool. Oh, I haven't mentioned yet that just like with this ultimate cut release of the first film, there are several moments throughout the course of this CD that feature previously unheard, completely unheard music, which is really fun. And honestly, if I'm comparing the two CDs together, to each other, the first film and the second film Ultimate Cut CD releases, maybe it's just my familiarity and love for the first film so much more than the second film that I want to say there might be overall more unheard music in the first Ultimate Cut CD for the first film than this one. But it's still really, really cool whenever unused and previously unreleased and unheard cues from Friday the 13th Part 2 would pop up in this release as well. Obviously, just like with the release of the first film Ultimate Cut CD, and some of my complaints I had with that release are gonna be the same thing with this release. Obviously, when you spend decades, 2-3 decades of your life watching these movies, these Friday the 13th films, the amount of that I've seen them over the decades, the music just becomes ingrained into your head, and the way it is in the films, the way it's mixed and presented in the films. So obviously what happens when you get a situation like this, in the case of the Ultimate Cut release of the first film and now this one, is all of the original master tapes were purported to have been found and used to create these two CDs, Ultimate Cut of the first film and this one. So what you have is a situation where you're going back to the basics, basically, and recording all this stuff off these tapes and then going like a puzzle pieces, going in and putting everything together and mixing the levels and stuff accordingly. And as a result, what's going to end up happening is, you're going to end up with a product that here and there isn't going to sound exactly like what you're used to. Some of the bits of the music that were much more pronounced in the film version might be more in the background, or vice versa. Things that were in the background of the film version of the music that you may have never heard are now going to be, for whatever reason, more in the forefront, so you're going to hear that stuff for the first time. So I don't regard this, while I regard this technically as kind of a complaint, it's kind of a cool thing at the same time. One thing that I would recommend for any big, huge Friday the 13th fan is obviously to have both releases, the original version of this CD and also the first film and all the other ones that they released in 2012 that was taken from the 5.1 remastering of the films that they did for the 2009 release of all of the original films on DVD and Blu-ray and stuff. Back then, La La Land Records put out the first 6 films. I'm pretty sure the 6th film, the soundtrack, the tapes were available, so for that CD it probably wasn't an issue, but probably for the first 5 that were released back then in 2012 or 13 or whatever it was in the box set of La La Land Records, that was going to be the music exactly as it was heard in the films, because it was basically probably just taken from the the music track itself from the films itself, so it's obviously going to sound exactly like it does in the film. So my recommendation to any huge Friday the 13th fans would be to basically have both. Have those soundtracks so you can hear the music exactly as you remember it from the films, and also as an interesting alternate take on the soundtracks, in this case for the first 2 films now at this point. Are they gonna, time will tell if they go on to do ultimate cuts of 3, 4, and 5. It's very possible, but for this, for the time being, we've got ultimate cuts of 1 and 2. I would definitely strongly recommend for all Friday the 13th fans that if you've got that La La Land Records, CDs of some of the other ones, to still get these ultimate cut versions, because ultimately it is going to sound better in a lot of cases, that more full the music. And although it's kind of disappointing to to have certain things that you're used to hearing more subdued or in the background, and new goofy noises being more pronounced, it's really cool at the same time to kind of hear a different version of a familiar score. And I gotta tell you, this thing clocks in at like 62 minutes and some seconds, and I gotta tell you, both times I listened to it, it's like, oh my god, it feels like 15 minutes. That's how much these, and I laid down on both occasions, just in bed, and listened to the thing all the way through on both occasions. And like I say, the hour feels more like 15 minutes, because it's just like when you grow up with these movies and you grow up with this music. And I gotta tell you, yes, when I laid down to listen to this the couple times that I listened to it, it's just like, oh my God, you know, when you're sitting there listening to this music, you become aware. I mean, I already know how important the franchise is to me, but you really become aware of how much it's in my blood, just this franchise and the music that is such a huge part of it. It's just like, oh my God. So, I mean, it's what's so great about the music that Harry Manfredini wrote for these films is that it's just so important on its own that it's like you can just sit down and listen to the soundtrack on its own, and you know all the feelings and all the memories of just decades and decades of watching these movies just flood back into your mind, and you know the images of what's going on screen. And I can't express how grateful I am to La La Land Records over the years for not only first presenting us with that CD box set release in 2012 or whenever the hell it was, that finally for the first time enabled fans to, you know, experience the soundtracks for the movies in really, really amazing stereo. I don't know how they pulled it off, because one would think if the music track would have been a mono situation, so I don't know how they made those the original CDs they put out sound so good. But now all these years later to have, like, you know, repurposed, you know, newly remastered and remixed versions of the first two, at this point anyway, soundtracks for this just beloved franchise is just so important to me. And just like, and then I was sitting there, you know, both times I was sitting there listening to this, I was like, and I was wondering whether or not I should buy this or not. Like, what a stupid idiot. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, but needless to say, I did end up buying it. But just like with the first release, the Ultimate Cut for the first film, as I said, there are unused cues on this release as well. And I want to say possibly not as much unheard stuff as maybe the first film, but when it does pop up throughout the course of this CD, the Ultimate Cut of Part 2, it is really, really, really fun. And a lot of the instances where you know, the music that I've never heard before pops up is, you know, one would imagine possibly that Harry Manfredini scored the movie before they cut it down for MPAA, and as a result, what ends up happening is a lot of the kill scenes, like the you know, the kill scenes in the movie, the music will go longer than the kill scenes appear in the finished film. And as we all know, you know, like Ralph's death scene and pretty much all the death scenes were originally longer. So it's really, really cool to hear the music continue on past what we're used to, the mark where it usually ends. There's a really good example with like Mark's death, the guy in the wheelchair, how he goes down, he gets chopped in the face with machete and rolls down the stairs. Well, as we all know, and any I don't know, true film fan knows that by the way they cut it and just freeze frame, that I'm pretty sure that in the original take, the dummy, or I would imagine it's a dummy in the wheelchair going down the stairs at night in the rain there backwards. I imagine right before they do the freeze frame and like zoom in, it probably rolls backwards and just all, you know, the dummy maybe falls out of the wheelchair or something. But in this Ultimate Cut soundtrack CD release of the score or the music for the film, you can hear the music continue on, and there's almost like a blump, you know, like maybe he landed at the bottom of the stairs or something. That really makes me, you know, wonder if that's the case. And I would imagine, like I say, maybe as originally in the film, they had the wheelchair go all the way down to the bottom and kind of go like that, because the music would indicate that it keeps on going down and like hits on the bottom or something like that. And it just makes you, I don't know, in a way it almost makes you wish like, oh God, I wish I almost didn't hear this, because now I want to see that footage or whatever if it exists. But there's a lot of instances where the kill music goes longer than, you know, the finished film. Obviously Scott's throat slit is longer, as can be evidenced in the, you know, recently released gore footage and stuff, so the music is longer as well. So things like that are really fun in this Ultimate Cut of this soundtrack. What's really kind of cool is, you know, the early on in the film when they stop in the middle of the road because the branch is there and Sandra finds the sign and stuff, and we all know when they get back into the truck and through Jason's point of view we see the kids drive away and drive off towards the Packanack Lodge, there's this really cool kind of music cue. Well, like on this soundtrack version, there's like I think 3 or 4 different bits of music, and I can only assume they're like different cues for the same moment, that, you know, the editor or director or whoever's editing the music into the film can pick whatever version they want. So the one that's in the film is like that, you as the truck drives away and it shows the sign before the dinging of the bell by Paul. Well, there's like 3 or 4 different versions of probably that moment that are featured on this CD as well, which is really cool. And those are obviously part of the unreleased, unheard music and for the soundtrack for part 2 on this CD. Really cool. Track number 5 here, Ginny Gets Followed, is most likely a never before heard or released track that was maybe written for a scene that has since been deleted, maybe when there's another scene of Jason following Ginny or something like that. But that was probably the standout track. It's its own little track, it's only like 38 seconds long, but it's its own little previously unreleased track that is really, really, really a lot of fun. I think it's the only track that is basically from beginning to end a previously unreleased track. But every time moments like that, appear throughout the course of the CD, like unheard music bits, it's just such a treat. It's like, oh my God, this has been lost for over 40 years and never heard by any of the fans. It's just so fun to freaking hear it after all this time. And getting back to the longer music cues for the death scenes, obviously the Jeff and Sandra music continues longer than it does in the film, because as we all know, that death scene was longer as well. So it's really cool to hear the music continue instead of just end like it does in the film. Same thing goes with Vicky's death as well. It's probably like everyone's death probably was originally longer than it appears in the final film. So the kill music for Vicky also goes on a little bit longer. So it's really cool to hear everyone's death music basically go on longer than it does in the film. And what's really interesting about this Ultimate Cut soundtrack release for Friday the 13th Part 2 is when you get towards the end and that they're about to open the door in the cabin, and it's, lo and behold, it's the ugly frickin' dog by the name of Muffin. I was really, really shocked and amazed to hear that there was a completely different cue for the dog reveal. And this is another reason to own the original CD that came out in 2012 by La La Land Records, because I would imagine that CD features the music as you heard it, or as it's heard in the film as well, whereas this version only features the alternate Muffin music and doesn't feature the music that was heard in the movie. So maybe a little bit of a gripe in that regard, like to not have the music as heard in the film anywhere on the CD at all, because in my opinion that's really not like an ultimate cut release. Like maybe include the film version as well, but I understand like if that version doesn't exist on the tapes they found, then I mean technically we're, I don't know, everything on this CD is completely remixed, remastered and restored and all this and that. So I mean I guess they could put that from the other soundtrack on here and indicate that it's not remastered or whatever, but that would be a little bit of a gripe. It's kind of fun to hear an alternate Muffin cue at the same time, but then it was like surprising not to have the one that's heard in the film anywhere on the CD as well. Obviously you can pause and read the tracks if you want to. This one thing that stands out, and I looked at the original CD release from La La Land Records for Part 2 from 2012 or whatever, and one thing I was going to complain about is, as you can see here, it says they refer to Sandra as Sandy, but it's like that as well on the original CD release of the limited edition box set thing, and it makes you wonder, maybe that's maybe they're taking these names from the actual score sheets or something like that. I mean, I don't know, maybe the name was wrong on the score sheet, but whether it's on the score sheets or not, I mean, you should fix the name. Sandra's name isn't Sandy, but many times on the back here we can see Jeff and Sandy sneak off to Camp Blood, and Jeff and Sandy get a visit from Guess Who, and Vicky visits Jeff and Sandy, and who. So Sandra is incorrectly named Sandy on the back of this CD, and also the first La La Land Records release of Friday the 13th Part 2 as well. You can see here bonus tracks. We've got the Dream Bed, which is just the complete version of the Dream thing. It's hard to explain. You'd have to, tell you what, buy the CD and read the linear notes if you want to know the story behind that. But just like with the Ultimate Cut release of the first film, we've got some tracks here without the flanger. Ralph gets cursed, which is his death scene. But one of the coolest things, as you can see here with tracks 22, 23, and 24, we've got rock and roll, or rock plus roll source 1, 2, and 3 in mono. And this is kind of the coolest thing, or some of the coolest details about this CD release, is finally, for the first time as far as I'm aware of, we can have the 3 rock tracks that were, written and probably recorded by Harry Manfredini, the music, that the kind of generic music that's featured in Packanack Lodge, and also the casino bar place where they end up going to. Finally, for what I think, as far as I'm concerned, for the first time, we can actually have those tunes in their entirety from beginning to end, which is honestly probably one of the things that made me just decide to go for it and order it. I'm like, oh my god, because you can tell looking at the track links. For the first one, it's like 3 minutes and 30 something seconds. The second one's like 4 minutes and 20 something seconds, and the third one is 4 minutes and, I don't know, let's say 30 something seconds. So all combined, that's quite a decent amount of running time for all 3 of those music tracks. The third one, apparently, I guess it just didn't sound familiar to me, or whatever one. There's the 2 of them that are really familiar. It's the tune that they're dancing to in Packanack Lodge, and then the opening tune to establish the bar casino location. But the other one wasn't familiar to me, but in the linear notes it says that it was featured in the background at the bar casino location. So if you say so, I'm not exactly sure I remember ever hearing that in the movie. You'd think it would have been familiar to me, but at any rate, at least the 2 tunes that we're all familiar with, the tune at the Packanack Lodge and the opening introduction tune to the casino bar, are featured in what I can only assume and tell by listening to them as their complete and full versions, which is really exciting. Harmonica source is actually different versions of the harmonica that Jeff does if they wanted to replace the actual blowing on it from the actual actor as recorded on set. Turns out they used just the thing that he blew into the harmonica on set instead of dubbing it over with something else. Then you've got a couple random dissolves in what they call here at the very end tile buttons, which are just little really cool things that just like cling, 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 bling, 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 just little, I don't know what you'd want to call it, just little noises that Harry Manfredini recorded for, I guess that way an editor could just put them wherever they want to put them. For example, when Vicky comes into an empty Packanack Lodge main cabin and kind of looking around, and then looks upstairs, when she looks upstairs, like clink, 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 there's this little ting, whatever the hell it is, kind of to indicate her attention being focused up on top of the stairs there. So those are really cool little extras featured in the CD release. And taking a closer look at the front cover, obviously mine's, the cover art is kind of covered over with the wonderful Harry Manfredini music and a little bit of the key, the thing that he did there with the musical whatever he's doing there, which is really cool. And honestly, I already talked about this when I revealed the news of this upcoming CD's release. I'm not crazy about the cover here and the kind of the fake, computer rain or whatever, but my version here with the Harry Manfredini stuff that he wrote on there, kind of covering up the lackluster cover, I think looks better than it does without the stuff covering it up. The compact disc itself looks like this: a dark, stormy night with computer-generated, most likely rain falling in the dark night sky, most likely. I mean, that's okay, it's not horrible. It gets the job done. And behind the CD, just like with the Ultimate Cut release of the first film, it's Harry Manfredini as a young lad, presumably writing the music for one of the Friday the 13th films. And I'm afraid I'm a little too lazy to show the booklet page by page. In a perfect world, that's what I'd do, but that's just a little more work that I'm willing to invest into this video. I would imagine you'd be able to see the booklet pages somewhere on the worldwide internet if you searched hard enough. Maybe some other kind soul has done a review of the CD on YouTube and is showing every page of the booklet, so you can pause and read if you want to. Admittedly, there's a lot of cool information, a track-by-track analysis, and a lot of cool information about the production of this Ultimate Cut CD release for Friday the 13th Part 2. And there's actually a lot of still images from, like, behind the not behind the scenes, but like still photos that from the film that I've never seen before, which are really fun. So The booklet is, I'm probably making everyone even more pissed off because I'm saying how cool the booklet is. At the same time, I'm saying I'm too lazy to show it. But like I said, the worldwide internet is a big place, and with any luck, you can search the booklet and find images of the booklet online. So I guess that pretty much does it for my review of this release, the Ultimate Cut release of Friday the 13th Part 2, music by Harry Manfredini, released recently in 2023, or the first month of 2023, by La La Land Records. And as I said in closing, it does make you wonder if they've got their hands on more original master tapes for the new material that was recorded for Friday Part 3 and Final Chapter and New Beginning Part 5. And I'd be all for more releases. Like I say, maybe it'd be more fair to have a single CD release of Part 3 and Final Chapter, as is probably not a whole lot of new material recorded for those two films. And by all means, release a separate CD release for Part 5 if they found the original soundtrack recordings for all the first 5 films. By all means do so. And one thing that I would say to any Friday the 13th fans out there is, the more we support La La Land Records in the release of the original CDs from 2012 or 2021's Ultimate Cut of the first film and this year's Ultimate Cut of the second film. Like, if you're big Friday the 13th film fans and you've got the extra dough, I'd seriously consider supporting La La Land Records. The more people support La La Land Records in their releases of these Friday the 13th soundtracks, the more possibility we will have of getting more of the Ultimate Cut CDs in the future, if indeed they did find material for 3, 4, and 5 and stuff like that, maybe even 6 as well, who the hell knows. But if you've got, I understand, I completely understand times are tough now, but if you maybe don't get a couple of McDonald's meals, or skip some of them expensive coffee drinks that are like $5 or $6 or $7 a piece, and maybe support La La Land Records and get these Ultimate Cut CD releases of these films. And they also sell other versions of the films, like they got a limited release that I'm kind of pondering getting of Part 7, which of course is the music that Harry Manfredini used for the first 6 films in combination with new Fred Molen music and stuff. I listen to the samples that they provide on the website for that, and I'm just like, God, I don't know if it's worth it that much to me. Like, the Fred Molen music in Friday 7 is fun in the movie, but I don't think necessarily listening to it on its own is like, I don't know, maybe someday I'll end up with it, maybe I won't. But there's other Friday the 13th CDs as well on the LaLaLandRecords.com. So I guess that pretty much does it for this review. As always, hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. And you can be sure that we'll catch you on the next video.